A UFC star and ESPN analyst has been charged with nearly a dozen counts of battery stemming from a Las Vegas brawl where he's accused of attacking 6 people. You've maybe seen Chael Sonnen in the Octagon or as an analyst on ESPN. The December 18th incident happened at the Luxor Hotel and Casino. Sonnen is facing a felony charge of battery by strangulation and 10 other misdemeanor battery charges. Among the alleged assaults, punching a man, kicking a second man, punching a third man square in the face, as well as using violent force upon a woman by punching and pushing her. Previously, he was charged with 5 battery citations for the incident, but the case was dismissed in January without prejudice, meaning charges could be brought again. His first court appearance is scheduled for April the 27th. The 44-year-old former fighter is most known in the UFC world for his rivalry with longtime former middleweight champion Anderson Silva. Sonnen was suspended for 2 years by the Nevada State Athletic Commission in 2019 for testing positive for several performance-enhancing drugs and never fought again. It was his 3rd positive drug during his MMA career. And no surprise, his future with ESPN is in jeopardy. The network releasing this statement that he will not appear on ESPN as we explore the details of these serious charges. Joining me now, NewsNation sports reporter Justin Walters and Jesse Weber, attorney and host of the Law and Crime Network, which I founded. Good to see you both. All right, Justin, first tell us about this incident. What do we know about it?
It's still unsure on what the motive is, but Sonnen is known for being fiery and hot-tempered. He also has a PhD in trash talking. He loves to hype himself up, and that's probably why he got into this altercation. But as you mentioned, those details are really disturbing. You don't want to judge or rush to judgment, but when we actually find out why this actually took place, I'm not sure it's actually going to rationalize what happened and why he would strangle someone, let alone allegedly use physical force on a woman.
Jesse, any sense of why they would have initially dropped the charges without prejudice, meaning they can file them again, and now file more charges this time around?
Well, the details are a little unclear. Usually when that happens is when there's a deficit in the complaint. You usually see that when there's a procedural error, like you file it in the wrong venue or the wrong jurisdiction. You give the prosecutors a time to refile and fix it. It's usually like a clerical error. That might be the case here. It might be something more significant, maybe more substantive, to get a little bit more evidence into the charge and really substantive, support it a little bit more. I will tell you what's fascinating about this is I've seen Sonnen fight in person. I've been to one of his UFC fights in Vegas. This guy's an animal. This guy's a beast. And courts generally do not look favorably on people who look like lethal weapons and using that kind of force. So this is fascinating to see. It's disheartening, too, because I was a big fan.
Yeah. And let me ask you, because it does seem like, and again, I don't follow UFC that closely, but I'm always sort of fascinated by it. They've had a lot of problems lately, a lot of fighters facing charges. And I'm reading now, the fight at a restaurant between rivals Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal. Tuesday, Conor McGregor charged with suspicion of dangerous driving, etc. I mean, does the UFC ever risk anything from this bad press, or is this just more feeds into what the whole brand is?
It does, but unfortunately, these fighters need to know what discipline is, especially when they enter outside of the octagon. You always have those few bad apples and outliers that really paint a really bad picture for the sport. This really feels, though, like a common denominator for UFC, but as someone that does follow the sport, I think large majority of the fighters are not getting into trouble. But unfortunately, those big-name guys, Anderson Silva, Sonnen, and unfortunately getting into these issues, that really just makes everyone think at large that all these people are having these counts of battery.
I just thought of a question, which is, why was he just pulled from ESPN now, but not when the first 5 counts were filed, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Because it was dismissed probably, and it was water under the rug, right? And then now you have the new criminal complaint.
Yeah, but I was thinking, like, okay, but what about in that time between the time they were filed and, it seems like the minute these got filed, immediately ESPN put out a statement, but they were probably ready for this, based on what had already happened with the initial 5 charges. My guess is that they were preparing for this. And Jesse, this is something we see all the time, which is where the media has to make a decision when someone hasn't been convicted, right? He's just been accused, and they have to decide what kind of action to take. And it can be tricky, although this one doesn't seem to have been a particularly tough call for ESPN.
Well, it's the court of law and the court of public opinion, right? We still don't know so many details of what happened here. So I hate a quick rush to judgment, but people look at him and say, UFC fighter, he's aggressive, he probably started it. But there's probably more details that we need to know. Remember, an indictment, a criminal charge is just the start of it. There's a lot more to the story, particularly as you could keep talking about why were the charges first instituted, why were they dismissed, why were they brought back? So I'm curious to see where this goes. It's just, like you said, I'm a big fan of the UFC. I don't like to see this kind of news, unfortunately, but this is what happens sometimes.
And 3 positive drug tests. That's also not going to look good on his resume. He was banned for 2 years and suspended.
Right.
So, yeah, the resume doesn't look good, not in his favor.
And I'll admit that it surprises me that Jesse Weber is a UFC fan. I mean, every day. I mean, I don't want to judge books by their cover, but this is a guy who wears hankies in his pocket and all sorts of fancy pants kind of guy. It just surprised me that.
If I rip the shirt open and there's a UFC shirt underneath, don't be surprised. I'm a little insulted, but it's fine. It's fine.
Exactly. No, but it wasn't just that he's a fan. He's actually seen him fight. So anyway.
Yeah.
Good stuff. I didn't realize that we had such an expert on hand.
We have to all go to a fight, maybe.
Exactly.
All get tickets.
Exactly.
On
well,
you, Jesse.
I did see Silva's leg actually break. I was there for that fight. And that was a whole different story. That was one of the worst things I've ever seen and heard. So, yeah, I'm a big fan. What can I say?
All right. NewsNation reporter Justin Walters and UFC expert Jesse Weber. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.